Ask, and it will be given you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Is there anyone among you who, if your child asks for bread, will give a stone? Or if the child asks for a fish, will give a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets.
So when I say space bar, everyone knows what that means. Imagine if we all looked the same face, the same height, the same body type. We would all be gorgeous, wouldn't we? Think about if we all sounded the same and our voices were the same and we thought the same. Also, we would all have the same kind of houses, wouldn't we? And they would all be painted the same, and they would be on the same size piece of land, and they would be the same layout. Now, a good part would be all of us would be driving Mustangs as our cars. But even then, that could get a little bit interesting too. But if we all thought the same, life would be, how should we say this? Boring. But that's not the way God made us. God made us different, to think different, to look different, to act different. That doesn't mean we don't come and agree at times, because we do. And that doesn't mean we disagree at times, because we do that too. And there's conflict occurs in community because we were made to think differently and made to be able to do different tasks and skills. And it reminds me always about Paul, who said that the church is made up of people of different skills and tasks. And some people are wonderful at music. Another one's going to be wonderful at being my assistant secretary, but he's a great finance guy. And others of you out there are good at other things that I'm not even sure what they are, but you have them. And when we bring them all together, as Paul said, in unity, then we're working as the body of Christ. So part of your becoming a disciple and a follower of Jesus Christ is that you agree to bring those talents and those gifts together into a community like this. Because Jesus has been talking about community a lot. And I didn't say space bar, did I? No. Okay, just to make sure. I thought I might have goofed there. Now she's got me confused because I was still on. No, I have it right down here just in case. And in order to talk about, see, I wasn't ready yet. I got 3 more things down on this one. See, I was smart. I put the iPad here. I brought the big one because I can't see the small ones anymore. I'll say space bar. Mike and I had a signal a couple years ago when this was happening. I said when I raised my hand, and then I go like this, it's like, wait a minute. No, I'll say space bar. Jesus also knew that when we come in community, we have conflicts, don't we? Conflicts because we think differently. Conflicts because we act differently. Conflicts because I like blue and you like red and you like purple and you like yellow, and that's going to happen. But in order to maintain community, and if you remember that we've been through chapter 6 and now we're in 7 of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is talking about community. How do you keep a community together? Because there will be conflicts. There will be disagreements. That's just the way it is. And he brought us this interesting way of looking at it, and that is, how do we treat one another? Which we call the Golden Rule. I love it. I can have a straight man giving me the lines. This is pretty good. I'll have to make her a little script. Space bar. Everyone heard that? Oh, you're already there, huh? Yeah, we'll have to teach you. Got to teach you how to go backwards now, don't I? But But there's a few sentences. Now, I should say the golden rule is verse 12, but there's a few verses before that. We start right around 7 or so. And the first one talks about asking, seeking, or searching, depending on your Bible, and knock, right? Ask, and it shall be given you, seek, and ye shall find, knock, and it shall be open to you. And I wanted to know, as I'm sure you want to know, is what did that mean to the people who were listening to Jesus that day? Because the commentators and the theologians of today, they talk a little differently about what these things mean. As Jesus was saying, now this, what I should say, we are talking about prayer for a moment in these couple of verses, and Jesus said, ask. What are you going to ask for? Jesus said, ask for what you need. Now that kind of bugged me when I read that part. Culturally, people did ask God for what they needed. And he's saying, hey, ask God. And I went, well, wait a minute. Isn't there other places where it says God already knows what you need? And God's going to give you what you need. Not what you want, right? What you need. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why am I going in prayer to ask God for things that I need and he already knows? And from that blank stare, you're probably waiting for me to tell you, right? Jesus was saying to us to ask in prayer for what we need from God because it shows our dependence and our faith in God that these things will be given to us. So in your prayers, ask God for your needs. In the Lord's Prayer, which was about a chapter or so ago, didn't we say, give us this day our daily bread? And we're like, well, why should I ask for it? You're going to give it to us. Because you're saying, I'm dependent on you, Lord, for these needs. And I'm acknowledging that you're giving it to me. So ask for it. Makes sense, doesn't it? Now, seek and search comes down to the way people viewed prayer in the sense that Jesus is saying, search for God's will and God's direction for you. And in ancient prayer, several months ago it seems, we introduced you to the Aramaic word slotha, which means prayer, which means to capture God's voice. So after you ask God and say, hey, these are my needs, thank you, God, you're going to say, God, what do you want me to be doing? Where do you want me to be going today? What is your will for me? You're searching for God's will and direction in your life. You should pray for that. Knock was an interesting one. Like, what are you knocking on? What do you normally knock on? You knock on doors. And in Jesus' day, they believed in something called the door of mercy. There were other doors. They called them doors because you would knock on the doors to get into the temple when the doors were closed. And they had something that was called the door of mercy. And the door of mercy, knocking at the door of mercy, basically means you're acknowledging that you're not perfect. I'm certainly not perfect. That computer is not perfect, even though Microsoft says it is. But we're imperfect people. Therefore, we need to be knocking at the door of mercy, asking for God's forgiveness. That's what people were doing in those days in their prayers. And if you pull out some of those prayers, you'll see it. Actually, if you take out the Lord's Prayer, you're going to find ask, search, and knock there. It's hiding in there. No, I should say hiding. It's in there, and in Jesus' day, the people would have gathered it. Space bar. I almost forgot the word. That's terrible. I got so bored I forgot my keyword. But then it goes on to talk about bread and stone. And didn't it say something like a father will not give his child when he asks for bread a stone. Now that one just throws you off the chart if you pull out, well, go to Google and look it up and look at the Christian interpretation of it. That's more what they think today. What did it mean in Jesus' day? First, what's interesting to note is that when people were living in tents. And believe it or not, there were a lot of people living in tents, still as nomads, even though you had your fortified cities, you still had your tents. And the culture of that day was to build, I'm going to call it a bread box. Everyone remember the bread box? It was a drawer and it had the metal. You remember the bread box? Imagine that bread box sitting outside your tent, and you made it out of stones. And then you put the bread in the box, if you will, and then you covered it with another stone. Now, why wouldn't you want to keep bread in the house? Well, what happens if you have bread in the house and you get crumbs everywhere and you don't clean them up? You get ants. They didn't worry about ants back then. They worried about lions and tigers and bears and wild animals and dogs. And if you had bread laying around the house, you might have some dogs in your house. So where do you keep the bread? You kept it outside. And in those days, the bread and the stone, they didn't make these gigantic loaves. They made little round loaves. They were lightly browned. They looked like rocks. The rocks in the Galilee were small basalt rocks. They looked like bread. People didn't have lamps. Can you imagine not having lights or lamps in your house? And when you open the fridge, there's no bulb there? It would be easy to pull out the wrong thing, right? You go in for the ice cream and you pull out the frozen yogurt. Totally wrong. But children used to cry. You know, how many of you remember your kids crying at night? They still do, I'm sure. And what they did in his day, culturally, is when the child cried. Now, I'm talking about a kid with some teeth. They would actually go out and get a piece of bread out of the stone bread box and give it to the baby. Dads would do that because the moms would, kick the dad and say, hey, your kid's crying. You know how that goes, right, guys? So you go outside. Oh, but it's dark out, right? And you have to move the big stone. You got to stick your hand in the bread box and you pick up either one of two things. You're going to pick up a stone or you're going to pick up a piece of bread. But the father is going to be extra careful to make sure he picks up a piece of bread. He might pick it up and squish it. You know, you can squeeze bread. Or he'll put it to his nose and smell it. But you would not want to give your crying child a rock to chew on, would you? That's what he's talking about. That's what's important. Spacebar is pretty cool. I get to control things for a little while. It's almost like ballroom dancing, wasn't it? In ballroom dancing, it's the man who leads. Remember that, guys? I did take a couple lessons. Then it says about fish and snakes. Like, what father would give a snake to his child when they're asking for fish? The main staple of the Galilee, being where the sea was fish. What people did is they would catch fish, they would bring them home, they would cook the fish, and they would put it in something called a fish pot. Did anyone ever do that? I hate fish, so I don't deal with fish. But that's what they did. And what happened was the roofs of these houses, the ones that were made of the basalt stone, they had thatch over the roof. They put mud, they put thatch, they put branches, they would make a roof. You know who likes to live in mud and thatch? Snakes. And if you were to walk into a house in the Galilee area in Jesus' day and look up at the roof, you would see like garden snakes. Yeah, I mean, I don't like it either, because Marcia's there going, oh my goodness. Yeah, they'd be crawling all over the place up there. And they would crawl up the walls, and they would crawl down. And you also had holes in your walls, because basalt is going to break down when the water hits. When the rain comes, doesn't come often. And if you end up with holes, what comes through holes? In this area, it's mice. In the Galilee, it's... And where do you think the snakes go? They can smell the fish. Hey, they like fish. So they would make their way to the fish pot, and what did they do? They got into the pot. So again, your child is hungry, you open up the pot, and you stick your hand in. Are you going to make sure you give them a piece of fish or a snake? Of course you're going to check. and make sure that you're giving them the correct thing, a piece of fish, space bar. And then we get to this next one. These three will go together, by the way, in just a second. We get to this being evil, and it says, you being evil. Did you hear that part? I'm like, I'm evil? What the heck does this mean? And it turns out that the words being evil is a metaphor telling us that we make mistakes and we're not perfect. We are imperfect people. We are imperfect because of the sin that surrounds the world. We're imperfect people because we screw up, we make mistakes. I think we all acknowledge that, don't we? Any perfect people out here? Well, I see some that are really, really, really close. But none of us are perfect. But imperfect as we are, parents do the absolute best for their children. Have you done that? My guess is yes. So you wouldn't go out and give a stone to your kid when he needs bread, and you wouldn't give him a snake or her a snake if she needed to eat. You give them a fish, and us imperfect parents are as perfect as we can be when we deal with kids, aren't we? And Jesus was saying, and God is going to be even better at taking care of these things. He's talking about needs again, the ask part. God's going to take care of your needs because God is perfect, isn't he? And Jesus is perfect, and you're going to be well taken care of. And I thought, wow, these sentences now make sense. Bread and stones and fish and snake and ask and serve, all of a sudden makes sense. Spacebar. And then it wraps into verse 12. Because now we all realize we're imperfect. We all realize that we're different. We all realize we have very common needs, but we also have some different needs. And then the golden rule comes in verse 12. First, I looked up, and if you go through history, there have been a lot of very smart people, but imperfect, who have given us golden rules. If you have an apocrypha in your house, or a Catholic Bible, either one works, and you look up the book of Tobit, Tobit is the first Hebraic writing that gives us a golden rule. We get them out of Greece, we get them out of Persia. Confucius said it had a golden rule. But the biggie is Jesus' golden rule, because all the ones that came before were negative. Jesus is a positive golden rule. Do unto others or treat others as you want them to treat you. He didn't say, like Confucius, don't do things to people. Don't treat people poorly. Jesus talked about it in a positive sense, which is the first one in history, and that's probably why there are none after his. You can't find one better. We're supposed to treat each other, and I'll use that word correctly. Treat people the way you want to be treated. But the question is, do we see that today? Because if that's not occurring, you're going to have the breakdown of community, you have the breakdown of society. Wars have been started this way, and it's something that we need to be thinking about, and what Jesus told us about space bar. I tried to sneak that one in, see if you caught it. So for us today to think about this passage is first to understand we're all going to have disagreements. It's going to happen, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's healthy, because if it wasn't for our differences, if it wasn't that we think differently, we wouldn't have probably 95 plus, in my opinion, of the inventions and cool gadgets and cars and houses, because we all think the same. We would probably not have the wheel, because we would all be saying that square thing we put on our wagon works just fine. He needed someone to say, this could be better. But if we all think the same, who's going to think it better? In other words, for a modern example is, we'd all still be carrying, I'm not sure how many of you do, carrying the first iPhone 1 instead of the new iPhone 10. Because people who had the one said, this is nice, but I want more. I want something different. And that's what sparks innovation is when people come together and they say, but I see it this way and I see it this way. And then the end result is the two of them coming together with ideas and merging those ideas. And I think that mainline church failures can be traced to how people treat one another. When conflict occurs, churches love to put it under the rug. And we were at a church where the rug was so full that the dirt just started coming out everywhere. And you wonder, why don't you people just deal with the problem, get it over with? No, we like to push it under the rug. I know some families that like to push it under. You know, eventually the rug gets really lumpy. And you have to deal with it. But it's the understanding of treating each other with respect and understanding we all have differences of opinion. And you know what? That's where the word compromise and consensus then comes. Because compromise will occur because we do think differently. Even if we all agree on the same topic, we're going to have different ways of implementation, different ways of viewing the same thing. And compromise comes in, and we work together to get these things done. And the church needs to be an example to society today, because we are all here under the, if you want to call it the umbrella is what the word I was going to use, but we're all part of the family of Jesus Christ. And with our disagreements, and with our understanding that we think differently, there's one thing we all agree with, and I hope you all agree with it, and that is of the forgiveness and saving love and eternal life that we are given through our faith in the acts of salvation of Jesus Christ. And if you're not sure about that, then you want to rethink where you are, where you should be. But that's our focus and that's our center. And then everything else gets built up around it. And we could be the example, and I wish we could be, but if you look at the church, it's not working that way. And it's not just the United Methodists, it's all of them. And the newspapers love to put in when churches are disagreeing and they're having splits and all that stuff that's happening. And think about what's going on with the Catholic Church in the United States. Anyway, this is just an incredible ugliness. And for United Methodists, John Wesley said that we are to be in community with one another. We held class meetings, they called them, instead of Sunday worship, so that we could be together and have fellowship together and work out any of these disagreements. And if we go back to the beginning roots, we are built on community. That's how this movement started. And we have this group of people we call millennials, and you know what they like? They love community. That's why Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and whatever the new one is, who knows what they are working so well for young people because it gives them these virtual communities. And I look at the United Methodists and say, why are we a dying church? Because we offer that. That's our theology. That's what we're based on. And especially today with our society, and I'm not going to say much about it, but you saw how fragmented things got this past week. Of people, it's okay to disagree, but the disrespect from all sides is just ridiculous. And here we are, Jesus telling us how to live together and work together, and I think we can make a difference and be the shining example. But not right now, because our church is in disarray also, and is going to probably divide in the next year, because people just get entrenched. And I stopped reading, I told Dennis, I stopped reading all those news clips because it's ridiculous. One side won't talk to the other side. And I just want to send them verse 12 and say, you're representing Jesus, you bishops and DSs and all that, but you're not showing it to the public. If she waved at the DS, I'm in big trouble. Oh, good. I would say, spacebar, real fast. But we are an example. We can be such an example as a church. But I don't think, we personally at the lower level, we can definitely show Felton in this community what it means to live in harmony and agree and learn to disagree, they say in Christian love. I think we could do that. I think we do that very well. I've been on ad board meetings where this whole security matter with Francis was there. Who else was there on ad board? And Betsy was there. There was definite disagreement about that, wasn't it? And we talked about that topic for at least a year. But when the ad board had a decision that we're going to just stay the way we are, and we don't need this extra, we do have a little bit of extra security, but the panic bars and the doorbells and the cameras, the ad board decided not. There were a couple of people that didn't agree, but we came together and we stand behind the ad board and what it decided. And I must tell you, that is a rarity. And I was so proud of all of you who are members of the ad board that night. That even in that disagreement, and it was pretty vehement at times, that we still came together as the body of Christ and did what we thought was best for this congregation. So I'm really proud of all the members of the ad board. You should be proud about it also. We can make a difference, I believe. Maybe not throughout the whole United Methodist Church. We definitely can make a difference here in our community.